Xiaofan was a great inhabitant of the world of gods, was one of the most powerful and respected beings in his world. He was able to control the elements and possessed unparalleled magical power. One day Xiaofan decided to marry his beloved. On the eve of the wedding ceremony, he was gently hugging his bride when he suddenly felt the bitter aftertaste of poison burning through his stomach. He understood that there were only a few minutes left before his end. His legs gave way, and after a few seconds his body lost the ability to move, and he died right in the arms of his fiancée in a matter of seconds. The killer turned out to be Xiaofan's brother, who was eager to gain his brother's power and magic power. He fled to an unknown destination, and Xiaofan died on the day of his wedding. Thanks to his divine power, Xiaofan was able to be reborn into the body of a teenager with the same name. Xiaofan understood that he had a unique chance to regain his strength, regain magic, and take revenge on his enemies. In Xiaofan's past life, the rarest pearl found in the depths of the soul was the pearl from the divine bone of the devourer of heaven. Such power allowed to absorb the power of 1,000 beasts, granting its owner a divine speed of development. In his new life in the body of a teenager, Xiaofan decided to take revenge on all his abusers and detractors, because only through force could he achieve respect. Thanks to his power and magic, even in the body of a teenager, he could bow down to a huge number of people. There was only one thought in his mind: to come back with great strength and conquer the divine world again. Thus began the rebirth of the strongest of the world of gods in the world of people. Our hero appeared in a wonderful place on the Shenhu mainland where power decided everything. Diablo stones played a huge role here, which occasionally descended from heaven in order to bestow the strongest war among people with new abilities. And when these stones descended from heaven, a real massacre took place on earth where the strongest people fought for life and death. Xiaofan appeared in a new body under the Lin clan in the city of Heishan, where the capital of the 4 clans was located. Xiaofan got out of bed, put on his shoes and went to the mirror. Surprised at his appearance, there was no armor. There was no huge mountain of muscles, there was only a teenage body and its magic, which moved into a new body along with Xiaofan's soul. At that moment, shouts and swearing could be heard in the hallway, where a maid blocked the path of some Lin clan gentleman. He wanted to clarify the relationship with Xiaofan, who somehow dropped the reputation of the Lin clan. The maid stood her ground and did not leave for anything. Then the gentleman who came slapped the maid incredibly hard in the face, from which the medicine in her hands fell out and broke, and the maid herself fell from the blow. As soon as the medicine fell, Xiaofan opened the door, and the maid rushed to him with exclamations of joy that the master was awake. The maid's name was Lei Yur, and Xiaofan treated her not as a servant, but as a younger sister. Xiaofan remembered this thanks to his mind chambers, into which he plunged in a second to understand who was standing in front of him. Xiaofan looked at the person who came to him and realized that it was Linghu, a worker of the Lin family, so Xiaofan immediately decided to teach a lesson so that he would not let his hands loose, especially on the girl. Linghu considered such a speech an incredible audacity, so he set out to teach a lesson and began to swing at Xiaofan using the magic power of a quick strike. Then Xiaofan's body lit up with an incredibly strong aura, and using his magic power, he immobilized Linghu's body. His hand caught fire, and he struck a very strong blow, from which Linghu flew to the other end, flying 5 meters and spinning in the air. The blow was so strong that Linghu couldn't even immediately get up and run to attack again. At that moment, another of the patrons of the Lin family entered the court territory, the grandson of the chief elder of the Lin family, whose name was Lilu, because of which the battle between Linghu and Xiaofan had to be stopped. The relationship between Lilu and Xiaofan was not smooth, and every time he came, he seemed to be running into rudeness. This time he came with an order to vacate the central chambers where Xiaofan lived, to which Xiaofan objected, since there was no such decree of the head. Lilu justified his decision by saying that Xiaofan was incredibly weak, but Lilu did not know that he was facing the strongest inhabitant of the world of gods. So he continued to run into rudeness, pouring out on Xiaofan how worthless and helpless he was. Xiaofan laughed and said that Lilo could perform on someone else, for example Linghu, who was standing behind Lilo. Xiaofan continued and said that anyone from the Lin clan could beat Linghu, and it would be no more than kicking a dog by the roadside. At this moment, Linghu could not stand such rudeness, and rushed forward to attack Xiaofan. Preparing for him his special skill, deadly dangerous steel claws, to which Xiaofan only waved his hand and a fiery core appeared, carrying Linghu into the wall. The impact was so strong that the wall collapsed a little and there was a dent where Linghu landed. After that, Xiaofan went up to Linghu and slapped him a couple of times for disrespecting him, his family and the maid. After that, he turned to Lil and sent him on his way, if he didn't want to get such an idea for him too. Xiaofan sinks into his consciousness and sees a huge divine monster whose power he used to possess. At this moment Lilo and Linghu are removed from the courtyard. Xiaofan approached the maid. She admired his strength and said that those medicines were left broken, so she went to get new ones and ran away. Literally 10 minutes later, the maid knocked on Xiaofan again and handed over the medicines. At that moment Xiaofan recalled his past. He remembered his grandfather who had to humiliate himself and apologize for his actions, where he had a fight with representatives of another kind, but he was framed. Xiaofan looked at the medicine and wondered if it could be that mixing two medicinal herbs could produce poison. The poison can even turn out not on purpose if you just cook these two potions incorrectly. The result is an incredibly strong and hard to detect poison. At this moment, Xiaofan decides to dive into the halls of his mind, where he sees a bright ray of light, behind which an ancient being appears, the devourer of heaven. He was a divine beast devouring everything in ancient times. Why Xiaofan displayed it in his subconscious, he had never seen it before, only in pictures and other images. As soon as he bypassed the Heaven Eater, he opened his eyes to a rare bone pearl from his past life. He realized that this pearl is the embodiment of the divine remains of the devourer of heaven. He took it in his hands and decided to accept its powers. Which is why his reincarnation took place, which completely restored all his lost powers and connected him with all the meridians of his body. Xiaofan was incredibly surprised that rebirth for him in a new body could happen together with the pearl. Then Xiaofan returned to the real world and tried to absorb the medicine on the table with one action of his hand, and it was absorbed. Moreover, even improperly brewed medicine pearl transformed in the necessary proportions, and it became the way its intended purpose. Xiaofan realized that with this incredible strength that his body possessed, everything could now become completely different, so he decides to return exactly everything that was taken away from him in his previous life. There are 3 criteria that determine the strength of a master: the quality of the technique, the level of practice, as well as the giftedness of spiritual attributes. And if the technique and the level of its practice can be brought to perfection, then the situation is completely different with spiritual attributes. They are determined by innate qualities, which makes it almost impossible to increase their number. However, the legendary ancient heaven-devouring beast is able to break this restriction. It is in his power to absorb everything that exists. Anything with a spiritual attribute, after absorption, the essence becomes part of his own spiritual root. This power that can withstand the heavens. Xiaofan gained incredible strength when the Heaven Eater's bone pearl merged with my Danshan, and Xiaofan didn't have such strength at all before. His spiritual power didn't have an attribute. Xiaofan comes to the conclusion that he has the power to obtain the power of the 5 attributes, only using the power of his Danshan on 5 items of different attributes. To begin with, Xiaofan decides to get the gold attribute, which will be the easiest to get. Then there was a low-quality gold in his hand, which he was able to absorb and receive the initial strength of the gold attribute. Then Xiaofan realizes that his new life has given him an incredible opportunity to put everything back in its place. And in 1 hour Xiaofan was able to develop his skills from the 1st level to the 4th, although previously he needed about days for this. Such progress is incredibly fast, even by the standards of the heavenly abode. Xiaofan came to the dining room to tempt the dishes served to him. Using the devourer's power turned out to be a very active physical activity, which is why he ate an incredible amount of spiritual food. Xiaofan, as it turned out, had fallen incredibly low in his previous life, which caused the people in the dining room to resent how much Xiaofan ate, to which he objected they should not care how much he ate. Lingyu also joined the aggressive dispute, saying that his danshan was destroyed, so he should not eat so much because he was wasting the clan's reserves, which are valuable resources. Xiaofan reminded Link how literally half an hour ago he had smashed him to smithereens, leaving not a drop of his honor and respect. Xiaofan didn't stop and continued that the surroundings in the dining room were like rotting meat that were defending against him, due to the fact that his danshan was destroyed in battle. But they don't know how much strength and power there is in his teenage body, which he received through rebirth, so they think they can easily overcome him. Then the lens took out a katana and began to swing at Xiaofan. I promise to put an end to his existence. Lingyu ran with a katana in his hand aimed at Xiaofan to plunge it into him while Xiaofan was sitting with his back to him. Xiaofan abruptly activated the power of the golden attribute and was able to stop the katana with ordinary chopsticks, after which he pressed Lingyu's hand to the table and stuck both chopsticks into his hand. Xiaofan turned to the others who had been threatening him just 2 minutes ago, but there was no trace of them after a few seconds.